He didn't just want freedom, he wanted vengeance. Wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, Damian Cole spent 10 years in a cage, waiting to come face to face with the man who destroyed his sister, and his life. A man who wore a badge. When justice becomes injustice, when the ones meant to protect us become the ones we need protecting from, what's left? This is the story of a brother. A sister. A brutal betrayal. And a system that looked away while evil hid in plain sight. But it's also a story of vengeance calculated over 10 years, because some victims don't forget, and they don't forgive. Before we dive deep into this shocking, emotional, and true-to-life crime story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. This isn't just storytelling, it's truth-telling. And what you hear today may change the way you look at justice forever. He wasn't perfect. He never claimed to be. But if there was one thing Damian Cole got right in his life, it was his sister. From the outside, Damian was just another rough-edged lad from the south side of Nottingham. 28, short-tempered, ex-football hopeful turned auto garage worker, with a tattoo of a broken crown inked across his neck and hands that looked like they'd seen more fists than friends. But behind all that steel and smoke, there was Rachel. Rachel Cole, his little sister. 19. Bright-eyed, kind-hearted, and terrifyingly fragile in a world that didn't care. She was the one soft thing he had left. The last piece of something pure after their mother's death ripped the family to shreds. She was his center. His blood. And he watched over her like a hawk. Damian worked late nights just to keep her in university. He skipped meals to pay for her textbooks. He'd fight anyone who even looked at her wrong, and he had. More than once. They shared a tiny two-bedroom flat above an old butcher shop, the wallpaper peeling and the pipes whistling in the winter. But to them, it was home. Every Friday night, Rachel would come home from Sheffield, arms full of laundry and head full of stories from uni, professors, poetry readings, the boys she liked but hadn't spoken to yet. Damian would play the tough guy, grunt through her chatter, pretend to not care. But the kettle would always be hot. Her favorite tea already brewed. Because he did care. More than anything in the world. That's what made that night so brutal. It was a Thursday. Damian was working overtime at the garage. A full engine replacement on a Peugeot 206, oil under his nails, fingers blistered and stinging. He was expecting Rachel to arrive around 9. She'd texted at 8:12. Train's on time. Be home soon. Don't forget to hide the biscuits. That was Rachel, always teasing, always sweet. But 9 came and went. Then 10. Then midnight. No Rachel. No messages. No answer. Damian's hands, still blackened from the engine grease, started shaking. He called her. Once. Twice. 10 times. Nothing. By 12:40 a.m., he was walking the streets, frantic. Phone in one hand, rage in the other. He checked the train station. The bus stops. Every pub she might have stopped at. And then, just past 1:15 a.m., the flashing lights came. Police. Crime scene tape. A stretch of overgrown road leading toward the old slaughterhouse outside town. And there, barely conscious, dumped like trash behind a collapsed fence. Rachel. Her face was bloodied. Her clothes torn. Her voice, a whisper. Her body, trembling. She looked up at her brother with eyes that didn't recognize him. Eyes full of fear. Shame. And pain. She tried to speak. Tried to reach for him. But the paramedics pulled her away. He shouted her name until his throat bled. No one would listen. Not then. Not when it mattered. And Damian, rage boiling beneath his skin, stood on the edge of a horror he couldn't even name yet. Because in that moment, he still believed justice was real. He hadn't yet realized that the man responsible wore a badge. Rachel couldn't stop shaking. She sat curled up in the sterile hospital bed, her skin pale and blotched, her voice caught somewhere between a whisper and a scream. Tubes ran into her arms, and bruises, deep purple, angry, raw, mapped her body like a crime scene. Because that's what it was. A crime. Committed by someone who was supposed to protect her. Rachel tried to speak the name. She tried to say it clearly. The cop. It was the cop. Damien stood frozen at the doorway, fists clenched so tight the knuckles were white. He wasn't allowed past the threshold. No touching. No hugging. Just cold observation through a pane of rules and protocol. Then she finally said it. Sergeant Louis Granger. The name dropped like a hammer. At first, Damien didn't understand. He thought maybe she was confused, drugged. But the more she spoke, the clearer it became. Rachel had been walking home from the train station. It was nearly 9 p.m., and the streets were near empty. That's when the police car pulled up beside her. The officer behind the wheel had a square jaw, a polished uniform, and that patronizing smile all women know to fear. He asked where she was going. She said she was fine, just heading home. But he insisted, said it wasn't safe, said there had been incidents. He offered to drive her. Said she'd be safer with him. She hesitated. Then he used the badge. I'm a police officer. You don't trust the law anymore. That's the trap, isn't it? Who do you call when the danger wears the uniform? Rachel got in. But she never made it home. They found her 4 hours later, barely conscious, her blouse ripped, her shoes missing. She'd been dumped behind an abandoned warehouse off Copeland Road, less than 10 minutes from their flat. Her underwear was stuffed in her jacket pocket. Whoever had done this had been deliberate. Methodical. And cruel. Damien exploded. He stormed the station that night, demanding to speak with whoever was in charge. The officers on duty tried to calm him down, threatened to arrest him for disturbing peace. But one man stepped forward. Sergeant Louis Granger. Decorated. Clean record. 15 years of service. Known across Nottinghamshire as a model officer and community mentor. Tall. Calm. Scar above his left brow. Blue eyes that never blinked. He introduced himself like he didn't know the name Rachel Cole. Like he wasn't just accused of dragging her through hell. I'm leading the investigation, Mr. Cole. I'll make sure whoever did this is brought to justice. You have my word. That sentence would haunt Damien for the rest of his life. Because it wasn't justice Granger was promising. It was control. Rachel tried to tell them. Again and again. She described his voice. His badge. The inside of his car. Even the smell of his cologne. But they said she was traumatized. That she was confused. That she was projecting blame. Within 24 hours, the official statement flipped. According to police records, Rachel's claims were inconsistent. And then came the bombshell. An anonymous tip alleged that Damien himself had violent tendencies and an unhealthy relationship with his sister. Just like that, the narrative changed. Rachel's truth was buried. And Damien became the suspect. He was dragged out of his flat at 6:12 a.m. the next morning. Still in his boxers. No shoes. No lawyer. They cuffed him in front of his neighbors. Slammed him against the wall. Called him a predator. Rachel screamed at the officers. Tried to explain. She was ignored. The woman who had survived hell was now painted as a confused, hysterical sister. And the man who should have been her shield was now the accused. Meanwhile, Sergeant Louis Granger stood outside the flat, arms folded, watching it all unfold. Smiling. That was the moment Damien knew, he'd been framed. And the man who had raped his sister wasn't just walking free, he was running the investigation. When Damian Cole sat down in the cold interrogation room, he still believed, deep down, that this was a mistake. That the truth would come out. That someone, anyone, would listen. But the moment Sergeant Louis Granger walked in, closed the door, and pulled out a manila folder marked, Cole, Damian, Suspect File, every ounce of hope he had left began to rot. Granger didn't speak for the first 10 seconds. He just stared. Calm. Emotionless. Almost curious. Then, with a quiet smirk, he said. Funny how stories change, isn't it? Damian leaned forward, fire in his chest. I didn't touch my sister. You know that. Granger smiled wider. That's the problem. I do. And with that, the trap was sealed. The so-called evidence came in like a flood, strategic, timed, and poisonous. A half-burnt gray hoodie was discovered in a dumpster 3 blocks from the crime scene. The DNA came back as Damian's. No blood, no skin, just his sweat soaked into the collar. He told them he hadn't worn it in months. They told him that's what all guilty men say. Then came the text message. A single screenshot, sent anonymously, from Rachel's old phone to a friend nearly 7 months earlier. Damian gets so intense sometimes. It's like I can't breathe around him. Out of context, it sounded ominous. In reality, she had sent it after an argument over a missed curfew. But context was no longer welcome in this story. Granger had built a fortress of falsehood, 1 brick at a time. The prosecution ran with it. They painted Damian as a volatile older brother, jealous, possessive, hiding a history of abuse under a facade of protectiveness. They told the court Rachel was mentally unstable, prone to fantasy, and possibly repressing trauma. A psychologist testified, without ever meeting Rachel, that victims sometimes misplace their abuser's identity as a defense mechanism. Rachel tried to testify. She stood up in court and screamed, "It wasn't my brother. It was that cop. The one running this case." The judge had her removed from the courtroom. They called her testimony, emotional hysteria. Her voice was buried, again. Damian's court-appointed solicitor was 2 years out of law school. He filed no objection to the withheld security footage from that night. Made no mention of the officer Rachel originally named. Didn't challenge the sudden change in forensic timelines. He called no expert witnesses. He didn't even cross-examine the police technician who found the hoodie. Damian sat silent as the walls closed in. Day after day, lie after lie. By the time closing arguments came, he could already taste the steel of prison bars in the back of his throat. The verdict came in just before Christmas, guilty. Count 1, aggravated sexual assault. Count 2, attempted murder. Count 3, incestuous conduct. Sentenced to 18 years in prison. No parole until year 12. When Damian turned to look for Rachel, she was gone. They'd taken her from the courtroom mid-trial and sent her straight to a private psychiatric facility. She was labeled a danger to herself. Unstable. A confused sister trying to protect a guilty brother. Nobody asked why the girl who accused a police officer of rape suddenly changed her story after speaking to her brother. No one cared. And standing on the steps of the courthouse, giving a statement about justice served, was Chief Investigator Louis Granger. He looked solemn. Controlled. A perfect image for the public. Behind the cameras, though, he winked. That was the moment Damian Cole died. What remained, what went into prison wearing his name, wasn't a man anymore. It was a storm waiting to happen. And in that moment, one truth anchored itself deep inside him. The law wasn't going to fix this. So he would. Damian Cole didn't scream when the prison gates closed behind him. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just sat on the metal bed of cell 27B in HMP Wakefield, England's most notorious prison, and stared at the wall. He was in for 18 years. For raping and nearly killing his own sister. And the real monster was still wearing a badge. From day one, Damien was marked. Sister rapist, they called him. The guards sneered. The inmates beat him. He was attacked in the showers, had his meals spat in, and spent weeks in solitary just to survive. But Damien didn't break. Because he had a reason to endure. Granger. He spent the first few years in silence, watching, learning. Then he began studying legal codes, criminal psychology, prison routines. He tracked the man who framed him. Sergeant Louis Granger was rising through the ranks. By 2021, he became Assistant Chief Constable. A hero in uniform. A rapist behind closed doors. Every headline Granger appeared in was a gut punch. But Damien never raged. He planned. Year 5 brought a glimmer of hope. Rachel had recovered. She reached out. She'd found a non-profit, reopened files, and discovered CCTV footage, Rachel entering Granger's patrol car the night of the assault. Then came the final blow, DNA results from her preserved clothing. It matched Granger. Everything Damien said was true. In October, Damien walked out after 10 years, 3 months, 6 days. No press conference. No apology. Just a trash bag full of belongings and a bitter silence. He was asked if he had anything to say. He did. But he wasn't ready to say it with words. He planned to say it with a bullet. They hadn't given them justice. They just admitted they'd stolen 10 years. Granger was never arrested. Instead, he was asked to retire with dignity. No charges. No disciplinary action. He moved to the countryside, quiet, comfortable, untouched. Rachel watched it all unfold. Her hands trembled every time his face appeared on the news. Damien, meanwhile, was gone. He didn't come to her. Didn't call. He vanished the day he walked out of prison. She knew what that meant. She knew what he was preparing for. Damien Cole didn't go home. He didn't stay for the press. Didn't hug Rachel. Didn't ask for money or revenge through the courts. He simply vanished. For 6 months, he became a ghost, off the grid, off the radar, and out of reach. No phone. No digital trace. No social media. But he wasn't hiding. He was hunting. While the world saw Louis Granger as a disgraced former cop living in forced retirement, Damien saw him for what he truly was, unfinished business. Granger had moved to a quiet village in Cumbria. Lakeview Cottage. Gardening. Teaching martial arts to kids on weekends. Still smiling in photos. Still respected. As if he hadn't left 2 lives in ruins. As if he hadn't raped Rachel. Framed Damien. Lied under oath. He got to live. Damien had only survived. Damien rented a room in a nearby town under a fake name. Paid cash. Took odd jobs. No questions. No noise. He watched Granger's routines. Morning walks. Shopping trips. Same pub every Thursday. Always alone. Every detail mattered. Every habit was a countdown. Then came April 17th of the following year. A Wednesday. Cold. Still. Quiet. Granger was found dead in his home that night. 2 shots to the chest. 1 to the mouth. Execution style. No sign of forced entry. No fingerprints. No struggle. On the living room wall, in black charcoal. You took her voice. I gave it back. DC. Then he wiped the pistol clean, tucked it into a canvas duffel, and slipped into the cold night, disappearing into the fog like a ghost. But ghosts leave trails. As Damien made his way down the driveway, a light flicked on 2 houses away. Mrs. Kershaw, Granger's elderly neighbor, had heard the gunshots. She peered through the window and saw a soaked man, tall, hooded, walking away from Granger's house in the rain. She didn't recognize him. But she saw the blood on his boots. And she called it in. By the time Damien reached the edge of town, he had already ditched the gun and burner phone beneath a storm drain. He boarded a late-night coach heading toward Manchester, thinking he was safe, unknown, untraceable. But police had already circulated traffic cam footage from Granger Street. A license plate hit matched the parked car from earlier that evening, registered under a fake name, but the rental agency's CCTV showed Damien picking it up. His face was clear. They found him just 7 hours later, asleep in the back seat of the coach, somewhere near Bolton. 2 officers approached quietly. Damien opened his eyes before they spoke. He didn't run. Didn't resist. Just stared at them and said, "I thought I had more time." They cuffed him without incident. As they led him off the bus, one officer asked, "Why do it now?" Damien paused. Looked out into the foggy morning and replied, "Because if I waited any longer, I'd start healing. And I wasn't ready for that." Damien Cole was back in a cage. But this one felt different. No screaming inmates. No guards slamming doors for fun. Just cold walls. A ticking clock. A silence that no longer hurt. He'd done it. The trial was swift. The evidence was undeniable. Damien never denied it. His defense team pushed for manslaughter by diminished responsibility, citing psychological trauma, wrongful imprisonment, and provocation. The Crown wasn't sympathetic. By September, Damien Cole was sentenced to 17 years for the murder of Louis Granger. With time already served, parole possible in 12. When asked if he had anything to say, he stood up, looked the judge in the eye, and said, "I'd do it again. But this time, I wouldn't wait 10 years." Rachel didn't attend the sentencing. She hadn't seen Damien since the night he vanished. But weeks after the verdict, a brown envelope arrived at her door. No return address. Inside, there were only 3 things. A photo of them as children, in front of their mother's old garden. A folded copy of the newspaper announcing Granger's death. A handwritten letter. "I didn't want you to live knowing he was still breathing. I wanted you to write books, fall in love, find silence without feeling guilty for it. I wasn't built for healing, Ratch. I was built for justice. And justice didn't come from courtrooms. It came from a pistol and a promise I made the day they dragged me away. Don't wait for me. Just live. I already died in that first cell. This is just the echo. Asterisk. It was signed. D. Rachel kept the letter in a shoebox beneath her bed. She never spoke about it. Never showed it to the press. But every now and then, she'd pull it out and read it alone, with shaking hands and dry eyes. And on nights when the world felt too loud, she'd whisper back to the silence, "I hear you." The world didn't know what to do with Damien Cole. Some called him a murderer. Others, a martyr. And some whispered his name like a question they were afraid to answer. But one thing was clear, the system that failed him would never be able to wash his name off its walls. Inside HM Prison Durham, Damien settled into the routine like someone who'd been here before. Because he had. But this time, there was no rage driving him. No vengeance burning a hole in his chest. Just stillness. He didn't talk much. Didn't fight. Didn't complain. When other inmates asked why he killed a former police chief, he gave no explanations. He'd already spoken with action. His silence was just tea. His silence was just the punctuation. Meanwhile, outside the walls, Rachel kept fighting, but not for revenge anymore. For reform. She gave her first and only public interview 6 months after Damien's conviction that she said, "My brother wasn't a monster. He was a product of one. They told me to forget. They told me to heal, but what they never did, was say sorry. Damien did what the law should have done. And for that, they caged him again. If you call that justice, maybe the system's more broken than he ever was." A year later, a parliamentary petition titled Rachel's Law began circulating. It demanded independent investigations into sexual assault allegations against law enforcement officers, and automatic reviews when victims identify members of the force. It got over 300,000 signatures. And on the anniversary of Damien's second incarceration, his name trended across social media again, not for what he destroyed, but for what he exposed. Back in his cell, Damien received a letter from Rachel, no return address, just 3 words written neatly at the top of the page. "You were right." No other words followed. He folded the letter once, placed it on the small metal shelf beside his bed, and leaned back. The war was over. And for the first time in his adult life, he didn't feel angry. Just free. He waited 10 years behind bars to right a wrong the law refused to face. In the end, Damien Cole didn't escape the system. But he made sure the man who broke it would never hurt anyone again. Was Damien a cold-blooded killer or a man pushed beyond his limits by injustice? If it were your sister, would you have done the same? Let us know in the comments. If stories like this leave you thinking long after the screen goes dark, subscribe to our channel for more true crime that dives deeper than headlines. Like, share, and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a story that asks the hard questions. This is Justice in Shadow. And we'll see you in the next one.